All right, welcome back to the Tank Me Later podcast, which is now part of Fantasy Basketball International. I guess it has been for a few episodes now, so I don't have to say that it's now part of it. But this is episode 28. Karan Talwar is going to join me once again, and this time, instead of breaking it down as a division, we're just going to recap Media Day. So let's get into it. And just a quick reminder before we start, sports betting has rapidly risen in popularity, and I want to connect you all with an opportunity to get started or get ahead. Having multiple sportsbook accounts is the most simple way to maximize your profits, and there has never been a better time to sign up. When you visit my page, signupexpert.com/TML, you'll be connected to all the sportsbooks in your region, along with a review of each platform and its unique benefits. All of these sportsbooks have valuable sign-up offers for new users, and when you register through my link, you will automatically receive the top offer at each one. When you use multiple sportsbooks, you ensure that you can always access the best available odds, which is key to successful sports betting. If you want to take advantage of these benefits and support our brand, please consider signing up for your next sportsbook at signupexpert.com/TML. I'm Noah Rubin, back with, like I said, episode 28 of the Take Me Later podcast, and we're going to talk about Media Day. And I'm going to bring in Karan right now. Man, busy media day. But before we get into that, first of all, before we even get into what I said we were going to get into before media day, how are you doing?
I'm well, man. I'm good. Just cranking out these pods. Yesterday did one with B-Dub as well for the FBI World Cup, a mock for phase one. So that was quite interesting. I am also traveling Thursday night. So I'm trying to get as much of this done in the next 3 or 4 days, and then it'll be travel. So excited to talk about Media Day. Let's hear all about everyone who's shooting threes, everyone who's a secondary playmaker, everyone who's gained muscle, because that's every year. So I'm chuffed to talk about this today.
Yeah, man, you've been on a hot streak with these podcasts. What is this? Your fourth in 5 days or something like that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because
Yeah,
yeah, 4 and 5 days should be. It's
nice.
it's a once you get the taste of it, you want more.
Yeah, no, it's definitely fun to do. And I'm assuming when you get back from traveling, we'll pick the streak back up. Maybe not quite as, 4 and 5 days is a lot, but maybe we'll see. But before we get into media day, let's talk about the Fantasy Basketball International World Cup. Drafts are underway. I believe they started about from the time of recording 28 hours ago, which means in my league they've made 16 picks, which is great because I understand, it's different time zones. Obviously, people are going to take time. Sure, cool. It's just very different when I've been doing 30-second per pick mock drafts all summer, and now it's 6 hours per pick. And based on the way time zones work, sometimes it takes that full 6 hours. But I guess if you want to mention what division you're in and kind of how your draft has gone so far, maybe some interesting picks and how you've been able to. I know you've only made one pick. I've only made one pick, but how it's gone so far.
Yeah. So I'm in the West. First of all, shout out to Beat Up and Josh, right? Especially Beat Up set up the whole divisions and the drafts and randomizations a few days ago. That I saw a little bit of that video, and that seemed like it was a lot of work. So good on him. Props to him. I think, yeah, in terms of the draft, I spoke about this a little bit yesterday in the mock. The strategy is a little bit different because you're only drafting until January 28th. So I keep that top of mind. For example, rookies who later on in the draft, like rookies, etc., who may pop off in Feb, March, I'm not interested in them at the moment because maybe by Jan they don't, right? And we'll have another draft. I'm not particularly interested in Ja Morant, for example, because he's going to miss the majority of this 3 month period. I am interested in Desmond Bain and Jaren Jackson. They get a bit of a boost in this format. So having said that, I did take Tatum in my first round. And I'm pretty okay with that because I feel like after the Drew trade, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit later on, I think he has a potential to get his defensive stats slightly up because he will need to play more of the four now. So I took him. And in my second round, matter of fact, I have made my second round pick as well. So I took Kate Cunningham. The decision part for the second for my second pick was between him and James Harden. And then when I heard about James Harden's, which we'll talk about again, spoiler alert, James Harden later on as well. When I heard about his media day, what's happening there, then I pushed him down on my board a little bit. So took Cade there. Did also consider Karl Anthony Towns, who went the pick after. One of the interesting things I've seen before I pass it back to you is in my draft, Anthony Davis fell to 13, 14, 15, 16. And the person paired them up with LaMelo Ball, which I feel like is awesome. 9 and 15. And that I feel like they got some value there because Davis per game could easily return that. So interesting. Let's see how the rest of it gets on. How's yours going?
Yeah, it's like I said, going slow, but it's been good so far. I have pick 3. I'm also in the West. I'm trying to remember specifically what I'm in Queenstown. So I don't know if anybody listening to this is also in Queenstown division. But don't take my guys if you are. But I have pick 3, got Joel Embiid, which I don't know. I feel like I'm pretty happy about. I expect him to go 2. It's not tremendous value. Like a lot of people are going to take Luka at 2. But Embiid at 3, I'm happy with that, hoping that I'm not even sure who I'm targeting at this point. So if you're listening to this with the intent of trying to steal who I have, sorry, I don't have anything for you. I'm just going to kind of see who's available. I feel like in the first 2 rounds, if I go to bed, maybe I'll set a small queue. But I'm hoping that with like 5 picks until my turn, because Fantrax has it right here, that I won't have to do that. But we'll see. That'll hopefully be awake in time to make the pick. So nothing too crazy has happened yet. I don't think Sabonis at 15, Kyrie at 16 is early. Somebody who's able to pair LaMelo Ball and Trae Young, which I think if you're picking from 11 or 12, that's pretty ideal because you have 2 guys that are going to get a ton of assists, a ton of turnovers, a ton of points, shoot a high free throw percentage. I think Trae Young is going to get back to hitting over 3 threes per game. He was down last year. I think he gets back up this year. Shoot a low field goal percentage. So they kind of fit well together. I think it's pretty, hard punt for some of those categories, but I like that strategy. And then somebody else able to pair KD and Kyrie, which I don't think is some incredible strategy. I just think it's funny because it's, just getting the boys back together to try and maybe bring a championship. Maybe they're probably not. But what if they're Nets fans just trying to relive the glory days of last year? Maybe. I don't know. Probably not. But yeah. So if anybody is listening to this or sees it on Twitter or YouTube, comment and let us know how your draft is going. I guess that's a good way to stay involved because the slow draft process is slow at times and we want to stay entertained. But we will go ahead and dive into Media Day. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up our slides because I went through and did about, I think, like 10 topics that we can kind of talk about. I don't know how long we'll go on each question. Hopefully not so much detail that we're talking about some of these things for 2 hours, but we're going to try and keep this short and sweet with good information. So this was before Media Day, but the first thing to talk about is the Drew Holiday trade. Last time we were able to talk about the initial Damian Lillard trade, and we were kind of saying, hey, Drew Holiday is not going to stick around in Portland. I don't think anybody thought that. So pretty quickly, faster than I kind of expected. I didn't expect it to happen that fast, but Drew Holiday is now a Boston Celtic. Boston had to give up Robert Williams, Malcolm Brogdon, the Warriors first this year, and then an unprotected first from Boston in 2029. So that's, 2 probably late first, but 2 firsts, Robert Williams, Brogdon. And overall, Portland was able to get DeAndre Ayton, Robert Williams, Malcolm Brogdon, Toumani Camara, 3 first-round picks, and 2 pick swaps from the Bucks for Damian Lillard. That's a heck of a haul. I don't think that they're planning, based on Media Day reports, I don't think that they plan to trade Malcolm Brogdon. They're going to keep DeAndre Ayton, Robert Williams, and I imagine Toumani Camara is sticking around just because he probably doesn't have a ton of trade value at this point. Malcolm Brogdon also chose the number 92 to wear. So I don't know if that affects whether he's a guy that you want to target in fantasy basketball or not, because somebody that wears 92 is just not somebody that I imagine producing in fantasy. But Malcolm Brogdon's a good player, so he'll probably be able to be one of the best number 92s of all time. He'll be up there competing with Deshaun Stevenson for that title. But Karan, just kind of give me your thoughts on how this trade went, if there's somebody that you think is really impacted in fantasy in a good way or really impacted in a bad way.
Yeah, speaking of numbers as well, I think obviously Dame went in and got number 0 in the Bucks. So I hope for Marjon Beauchamp, who was I think number 0 before, I hope he got something from Dame in return for giving that number. But yeah, this trade, yeah, I mean Drew moves to Boston. Boston is, I mean, if you look at their depth chart, they are relatively thin at the moment. I think there's like 6 players, maybe 7 if you want to count. I think they signed Wendy and Gabriel. 7 players who are going to be playing rotation minutes regularly. Drew Holiday remains to me same. And you get him in the 60s. I'm happy with that. I wouldn't reach for him in the top 40, like we would in previous years, just because he is playing with Jaylen Brown and Porzingis and Tatum. I feel like Derek White, your guy Derek White.
Yeah, sad day.
Sad day in the Derek White household. Top 70 season, like top 70 pick is probably not it for him. If you get him outside the top 100, it's great. If you get him outside the top 90, I can potentially live with it just because of the depth, which I mentioned earlier. In terms of Rob Williams, and we move on to the Portland side, in terms of Rob Williams, I don't know, man. I think are they going to play him at the 4 with Ayton? That's not a lineup that makes a lot of sense on paper, but let's see. He is going to play, I think, 20, 22 minutes minimum. I mean, I would say could be higher than this easily. I would not target him in the top 100 at the moment. Seeing what happens in preseason, not before that, but I wouldn't target him in the top 100 at the moment. Malcolm Brogdon as well. Again, Portland's guard depth behind Simons and Scoot, and if you want to count Sharp as a 2-3, is thin as well. So he could be playing 25, 26 minutes there. As a back-end guy, if you want to like get some assists, some good free throws, like in the last round, I'd potentially be okay with it, but I don't see much upside there. Ayton, we spoke about, I think, a little bit yesterday in our last podcast, which we did a few days ago as well. He does lose a little bit with Robert Williams there because there is someone who can come in and take some of those minutes as well. But yeah, that's how I'm looking at this trade at the moment.
Yeah, it's like you said, we'll circle back to Boston, but Derek White was a guy that I was probably drafting maybe even inside the top 70, barely, with the hope of him having that top 50 upside that I've been saying. That would obviously have been best case scenario. I still think that there's a chance that he starts. I don't know if he'll start at shooting guard with Al Horford off the bench or if he'll just be the 6th man. Not sure what that looks like yet. But the assist upside's gone. He'll probably be very similar to what he was last year. So, Robert Williams, I kept seeing different Twitter accounts posting that Portland's starting lineup was going to be like Scoot, Anthony Simons, Jeremy Grant at the 3, Robert Williams at the 4, and DeAndre Ayton at the 5. Or I saw one that even had Anthony Simons as the 6th man, which was just very interesting to me, that the way that some people just look at it. Because to me, Robert Williams and DeAndre Ayton at the 4 and 5 just isn't going to work. I think the reason that it worked with 2 bigs in Boston was the fact that Al Horford is just an incredible defender, both down low and on the perimeter. And he could kind of switch out onto 4s and in guys' time. Robert Williams kind of sit and help. DeAndre Ayton's just not doing that. So it doesn't make sense defensively, and it certainly doesn't make sense offensively because Robert Williams he's not going to space the floor much. I'm not saying he's awful, but he's not a guy you're looking. I mean, he's certainly not hitting threes. I feel like for some reason, he has like a little bit of touch from mid-range, but he's probably not shooting a ton of those. DeAndre Ayton has a little bit of touch from mid-range, but it clogs the lanes. And if they have guys like Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe, Jeremy Grant, they're going to try and get to the basket. They want spacing. Starting Scoot, Anthony Simons, Shaedon Sharpe, Jeremy Grant, DeAndre Ayton just makes sense to me. And having Robert Williams kind of playing a similar role, like 20, 22 minutes off the bench, like you said, definitely limits Ayton I think after the trade, it was like, wow, DeAndre Ayton is going to be the center in Portland. He's going to play 32, 34 minutes a night, and he could have the best fantasy season of his career. And now it's like Robert Williams here. It's like, oh crap. Like Robert Williams has had plenty of injuries and knee issues, but when he's on the court, like they have to play him 20 minutes a night bare minimum. So that really limits Ayton because those two, I just don't feel like they fit together. Maybe they can make it work, or maybe they just try and force it and just see what they have. I don't know what Chauncey Billups is going to do. Brogdon, like you said, I don't have not much fantasy upside. I think he's going to be able to be a great veteran for them. Maybe if depending on how they do things, I don't know, maybe they'll want to initially have him start at point guard and let Scoot come off the bench. I don't know that I'd do that. I think just having him there as a mentor for Scoot is going to be really good, and maybe try and trade him at the deadline to try and get a little bit of value back, get him to a contender. I think that's probably how that kind of thing plays out. But and yeah, Drew Holiday is going to be really freaking good in Boston, and they're going to be a really, really good team. I don't think, like you said, it impacts his fantasy value a ton. Maybe the offensive opportunities go down a little bit, but I would assume the efficiency pops up and he's able to focus a little bit more defensively, maybe get some like even more steals. I don't know. I don't think that's going to impact too much for him there. Do you have anything else about this trade before we move on to whatever the next thing is? I don't remember what it is.
Yeah, I think one thing you mentioned is want to highlight that again. Like Malcolm Brogdon could still be traded, right? Because I don't believe in trade showcases, but there were sort of reports of his health right before the Clippers trade. So if he comes in and plays a few months and he looks healthy, there are contenders who could use him coming off the bench.
Definitely.
Or maybe even starting, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Maybe December, Jan, Feb, he gets moved, and then they get something in return, or maybe picks in return, 1 pick or 2 picks in return.
Yeah. And yeah, so we'll move on. Devin Vassell, that's who it was. I think I added this in later because it happened right at 5 p.m. after I'd already made some of these, but he got a 5-year, $146 million extension. I'm a huge Vassell fan. I think he's going to have a really good season. I think he missed some games last year due to knee issues, but I think another year of development, having Victor Wembanyama there should allow him, because him and Keldon Johnson were kind of the main scorers last year, but everybody's going to have like game plans are going to be centered around Wemby just because of the hype. So I feel like Vassell may go a bit under the radar at times, but I think he's going to be in for a really good year. And he has a very fantasy friendly game, hits a ton of threes, gets steals, athletic enough to maybe get you half a block, and has the upside, I think, to get more than that. But the Spurs also kind of showed that commitment of, hey, we really believe in this guy. We're going to give him almost $30 million a year. Now, it's not quite as much as some other guys from that draft class have gotten. Obviously, you look at Anthony Edwards, LaMelo. Of course, they're going to get more. Desmond Bane got more. It's not quite to that level, but he's still a really, really good player, and they clearly value him. I think he's probably him and Wemby. I'd say Zach Collins, the guaranteed starter, are like the 3 guaranteed starters in San Antonio to me. And I thought it was going to be Trey Jones and Keldon Johnson. But then there was a media day photo with Jeremy Sohan and not Trey Jones. And I have no idea if they were trying to throw everybody off with that or just doing that for whatever other reason. And that's nothing to do with their starting 5. I don't know. We'll kind of have to see what happens there. But does a massive extension like this during media day kind of make you feel, I guess, a little bit more hopeful about Devin Vassell? Or does it make you kind of say, oh, he just got paid, maybe he's not as motivated now? Like I don't feel like that, but I'm curious kind of what you think, how this extension maybe impacts him.
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of what you said, right? In terms of he did take big strides last year, right? In terms of being more on ball, his 3-point shooting you mentioned as well, which is getting up there in terms of how good it is. He had secondary playmaking chops he showed as well, which is something which he could have in this lineup. He did overall. He just took a bigger offensive load last year, which was interesting and which was good to see, right? Because he does have that talent to be a 3-and-D as well as a secondary playmaker. So for people who've been following Spurs and us in fantasy who like Devin Vassell, this is no surprise in terms of the extension for him. But I think what it does do is for some more of the people who are not following the Spurs as much before this year, or maybe just not big on the tank job, the quote unquote, that Spurs did last year, to get Wemby. Now they will be noticing, okay, Devin Vassell, let's see what he's about, right? So maybe in ADPs, etc., he rises. I mean, this is just a guess based on some people who don't know his value. For us, like it remains the same. For me, he's going to be clearly. Maybe in the beginning he's the number one option, right? Because Wemby is still picking up. Obviously, he will become the second option as soon as Wemby has one or two of those big games. And then he's a key part of their future moving forward. So I love this for them, and I think in from a pure macro perspective, I think as the cap will go up in the next few years, this will start to look like a bargain. If you look at it from year 2, year 3 onwards, I know this number looks big right now, but over time, this would be a bargain if he stays healthy, obviously.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Being a bargain, I think, is something that I definitely was gonna say. So I'm glad you went ahead and mentioned that. Yeah, Devin Vassell is obviously not the future of the Spurs, but I think he's going to be a starter there for a long time. This contract reaffirms their commitment. In Dynasty, I already was very high on him, but I feel even a little bit more comfortable now that even despite missing over half the season last year with a knee issue, they gave him a big extension. They gave him money. They're committed to him. They believe in him. So I think that could really start to be shown as early as this season. I think his FBI ADP was 73 when I just had that pulled up. So a guy you're able to get early in the 7th round, I have no problem taking him earlier than that, though. So I think he's in for a big year. We'll move on. I know you mentioned this earlier. James Harden didn't show up for media day because he's quote unquote still upset. He wants to be traded to the Clippers, and it hasn't happened yet because the Clippers just don't have the assets to make a move for James Harden. They just don't. But I know you had the opportunity to pick him with whatever. Would you have picked 18 to get him? Where I don't know where you. So you had the opportunity to take him there. Where do you think you would have drafted him? Like, where would you feel comfortable drafting him? And then if you want to add some speculation about, where could he end up? Like, is he sticking in Philadelphia? Is he going to get to the Clippers? Are they going to trade him somewhere else? Is he going to just sit out and not play?
It's for me, yeah, it was a pick 20, and I had him in my mind, and with Carl Towns as well, and then Cade, who I ended up picking. I think for James Harden, this is the final year of his contract. He needs to play this year in order for him to get that contract and another contract next year. So if he wants to play more years, he needs to come in and play this year, right? The uncertainty now is essentially a staring match between Daryl Morey and him. Who's going to blink first? And then we just have to wait on that as people in fantasy. Because wherever he ends up, right, he's still going to be a primary ball handler, right? Let's say he goes to the Clippers, still the primary ball handler. Let's say he stays here, still the primary ball handler, right? He goes somewhere else. I can't think of a third team, but wherever he could go, he'll still end up being like 20 and 10, right? Which has its value. So I think I wouldn't, because if you can get him in round 3, right, and end of round 3, let's say 30 pick 30 onwards, and we find out by opening night that he's moved to the Clippers and it's all fine, or we find out maybe like 1 week into the season that it's fine, then you've got some value there. You've potentially got 15 spots of value. The flip side of that is that we've seen this with Ben Simmons, with Daryl Morey, although it was a little bit of a different situation, not as how this one is, that they could just wait for the best offer and just keep waiting and waiting. But I think in terms of Philly, they are looking at this year as a championship contention. So I don't think they would want to wait so long to settle this. Just because, with Embiid and all the back talk of the Knicks and all that kind of stuff that's happening in the back end. And then you see the arms race in the East. Like, you got Milwaukee with Dame. You got Drew in Boston. Shout out Miami Heat, staying the same. So with that in mind, Philly needs to decide what they want to do, right? And that to me is a factor that this won't. I'm not predicting this, but I think it's not going to take that long for this to get settled. So I would take him in the 3rd round. If he falls in the 4th round, I'm taking him every day. I'll take that risk in the 4th round, and cover the draft up. I've spoken about this concept. I'll cover the draft up with more safer picks, and then in my picks around that, so that I can take him in round 4 or round 3 and be happy with it, even if he's out for a month.
Yeah, I like that line of thinking because I was pretty against drafting him altogether. I'm not I'm pretty low on James Harden, and I think that's just something that I don't know. This is probably just me being wrong. Is that even if he's fully healthy, I probably late second round for me, and I know he has the upside to be much better. I don't know. There's just something about it I just don't like. But and that's the hard hitting analysis you get on the Take Me Later podcast is just I don't like the vibes, and all of a sudden I'm out. But third round I think is it's probably a good spot. Pick 30. I think I'd be very, very happy to take him there because even if there's a guy I don't like at some point, you can get them late enough that, okay, I like them now because, yeah, it just makes sense for value. Fourth round, I agree every time. Pick 30, I think, is probably a good spot for me because you already have at least two guys that are solid picks with your first two. I don't know at this point if I'm taking him in the second round. His ADP, I believe, was like 21 before. I think the team, if he doesn't stick in Philadelphia and they don't find a trade with the Clippers, because it just seems I think the Clippers just stopped being interested. I don't think that Philadelphia was stopped, even though it was probably to do with Daryl Morey's high price. Well, justifiably high price. I don't think the Clippers have a ton to trade away that makes sense for Philly that also allows the Clippers to remain a contender. So it's just kind of iffy, but I could see something with Miami if they actually want to do that. Because I mean, they were trying to pursue a Damian Lillard trade. I don't see why they wouldn't flip to James Harden right now if he's in for that. But he also is probably the exact opposite of Heat culture in the way he plays and operates. It's just the exact opposite of what they like. So the talent makes sense. And I think the fit on the floor makes sense. But I just think that it's kind of like Damian Lillard in hashtag Heat culture, that kind of made sense. I just don't know if James Harden would be quite as good of a fit as Dame would have been. But that would also be a really good spot for ball a good bit, but also playoff ball when Jimmy Butler has it. Pick and rolls with Bam Adebayo would be good for him. So maybe my dark horse team to come away with James Harden is Miami, and I think that would be pretty good because I think time's kind of up in Philly, and I don't know. The Clippers just seem like I know he wants to go there, but if we're just talking strictly fantasy, like having Russell Westbrook there, I just feel like they would still start him and just do Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, and Zubats, and that just sounds like an absolute mess to me. So I don't know. To me, that just sounds like a bunch of guys that are past their prime trying to win a ring together, and it just wouldn't work out. But we can move on to another. Well, we were just talking about Kawhi Leonard. So these are a couple of quotes that he said today. I just kind of pulled them out of longer ones, but he said, if I'm able to play, I'm going to play basketball. And if I'm hurt, I can't play basketball. These last 2 years, I tore my ACL and I tore my meniscus. I'm either guarding the best player or the best player's guarding me. There was another quote where somebody asked him about like the games played threshold and like the not sitting back to backs, like playing 65 games to get awards, and the team's unable to rest one or like two stars at the same time. And he was like, I have no idea I haven't even heard of these things, like whatever. But then basically kind of saying like, when he was in Toronto, if the NBA wants to hold that against him, like he was coming off an injury. But if, I think the same was kind of the case at the beginning of last season, but then he got hurt again. And then when he was able to play last season, he played big minutes and he was very effective and then got hurt again in the playoffs. The way he was talking today kind of made me think that, like, okay, he has the mentality now where he's actually kind of sick and tired of everybody saying this. Because in the past, I mean, it's been going on for years now where people are saying, oh, Kawhi can't stay healthy. Kawhi doesn't want to play basketball. He doesn't like it. He just does it for the money. Now he's got paid. Like, he's going to rest as much as possible, come in, play a little bit here and there so he can still get paid, whatever. Now he's kind of making me think that, okay, he's kind of interested in playing as much as he possibly can this season. And it makes me feel more confident drafting him. He also said he wants to play in the Olympics next summer, which was pretty surprising to me because I think he's a guy where I can't imagine him wanting to play in the Olympics because of the narrative that's around him of not wanting to, or like not being available for games, probably wanting to take the summer to rest. So that was exciting to me to make me kind of say, okay, like Kawhi Leonard might be back. Like he might actually play a lot this season, take it more serious. It seems like Paul George is kind of giving that same vibe with his quotes. Like this has me hyped up and ready to say this is the year for the Clippers. Like, am I overreacting? Should we have a good bit of optimism heading into the season with Kawhi Leonard?
We should. So there's a lot to unpack there, right? Firstly, I think in general, right, players don't want to miss games, right? These guys all want to play basketball, right? But that's just in general. I know the media and a lot of hate for like load management and sitting games and all that, but in general, I would say that is the norm for players, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of for Kawhi, right, last year I took him in one of the FBI leagues. It was a Roto league. So it was 8 cat, I reckon. And I took him in, I think, the 30s, I want to say. And obviously, you said it earlier. He started off really slow. He was coming off the bench. He was playing 20 minutes. I was in the Discord chat. I was getting a lot of slack from everyone. They were sending me like Keegan Murray trade offers. They were sending me Jeremy Sohan trade offers. They're like, this guy's not going to do nothing for you. And I'm just like, all right, fair, all right. And someone sent me an Ayton offer, DeAndre Ayton for him, and I almost pulled the trigger, right? Because that's how frustrating it was to have him in your fantasy team. But then I kept with it, and then obviously when he came back, he was a top 5, top 6 player, right?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of me looking at him for this year, I would be happy to take him in the 3rd round. Again, with that same logic which was there for James Harden, you cover it off, it's sort of around there, more quote-unquote safer players, safer picks. In round 3, happy to do it in a format which is Roto. Yeah, I mean, I'd even like early round 3 is fine for me because it's Roto, right? It's easier. And head to head, like maybe after pick 33, 34, like late 3rd round, I'd start to definitely look at him. And in terms of moving forward, you know what you're going to get. He is going to miss back-to-backs. Assume that he's not going to play back-to-backs this year. He may, like he did last year towards the end, but he's coming off that knee injury. He may not play. And in terms of for the Olympics, that's good to hear as well. That means he's obviously, I don't think, please correct me, I don't think he's won a medal yet in terms of for the Olympics. I don't think he was part of the last few squads. So it would be good for his own like overall legacy as well if he wants to look at that. And us as fantasy people, that's like, okay, he wants to stay fit and he wants to have a healthy off season as well. So yeah, I'm happy with him in the 3rd round onwards. Just know your league as well, because sometimes he may fall to like round 4, round 5 as well. I've seen, because there's some people who are just like, I'm never drafting Kawhi again after last year. And then if you know that about your league, then you can potentially get a 1st rounder at pick 47, and if it works out, you have an almost league winner in your hands if you've drafted well throughout. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I'm looking it up because you mentioned that. Let's see. I think he was on the 2014 FIBA World Cup team. He plays on the 2012 USA Select team. Maybe he wasn't. Yeah, no, it looks like he was kind of with the team, but didn't really play. He hasn't really played for Team USA yet. So if he were to play, it would be his first time. His ADP in the FBI draft only leagues was 38. So that'd be early 4th round. I think I would absolutely take him there after these quotes. Absolutely. I think before it was kind of like, oh, that's kind of like a fair place to take him. Maybe, get him at value, cool. But I think after I don't know, maybe I'm just too much of a sucker for a good quote. And I feel like this is the Clippers' year now. But I think I feel more comfortable taking Kawhi, especially if he's going after Paul George, which I don't know if that'll happen in drafts that are happening now. But that's what happened in these draft-only leagues is Paul George went a few picks before Kawhi. But I don't know. I just feel like you said, he's probably not going to play back-to-backs. What'll probably happen is when there's a back-to-back, Paul George will play one, and then Kawhi will play the other, depending, or vice versa. One of them will play game 1, one of them will play game 2. But maybe we're wrong. Maybe, both of them are coming off injuries. I know Kawhi's was knee. I can't even remember what Paul George's was. I think, I don't remember. But I imagine that there will be times where they have to load manage in a way. But I think that, like you said, Kawhi was able to play in back-to-backs down the stretch of last season. So might be able to keep doing that. I don't know. I have more optimism heading into this season for Kawhi than I have over probably the past 2 seasons. So I think especially having the ADP drop helps that, because last year I think he was still a second round guy, but getting him late third, early fourth round, I'd be very happy with that.
Yes, sir. Agree.
Yeah. So we'll keep talking about the Clippers apparently, because I guess I put all these in order. But Bones Highland, so both Tyronn Lue and Kawhi Leonard referred to him as the quote unquote backup point guard with the Clippers, which probably isn't super surprising given who's on the roster. Like he just fits in as the backup point guard. But there was times where Terrence Mann was playing point guard for them. Norman Powell was able to be a secondary ball handler at times. Obviously, Kawhi and Paul George had the ball in their hands a ton. Russell Westbrook's the starter, but Bones Highland is, I don't know, maybe it's just the way they were saying it. This means nothing, but he's going to be the backup point guard for Russell Westbrook. I don't know if that means it's going to be like 28 and 20 with the minutes, or if it's more like 32 and 16, or if it can be like a 30 and 20 with both of them on the floor for a few minutes, or 30 and 22. Bones Highland had a lot of upside in Denver, and then obviously things just didn't work out. He has a new home, and it didn't seem like at times last season it was going to be a seamless fit. There was times that he just sat on the bench the whole game, but he's still a talented player. He can hit threes. He can pass the ball well. He can score. He isn't going to probably help you with your field goal percentage at all, but hearing that, let's call it a 16-team league instead of a 12-team league. 16 teams going 14 rounds, so you probably getting into the 200s with that. Is he a guy that has some late round value for you, or if he does in a 12-team league, does he have that for you?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with him, right? He has good fantasy talent. I think the one game, it's a small sample size, but the one game he started last year for the Clippers, he put up like 20 and 11. Right. So you could see what's there for him, right? But in terms of a standard redraft 12 team, he's a watch list guy for me. He's not going to be someone I'm looking to target, just given Westbrook's there, Terrence Mann is there, as you mentioned. If one of them goes down and misses games, yes, he'd be number one on my watch list to get in from the wire, right? Deeper leagues, yeah, have a crack, 14, 16 teams. Take him with your last pick, second last pick. I have no issue with that. Just know that it could be slow. He could have nights in which he's just playing 15 minutes, 14 minutes. He could have nights when he's shooting hot from three and he gets 23, 24 minutes and gets some value there. So yeah, that's how I would look at him. But it is encouraging to hear that they're viewing him that way, and it does give a better outlook to him this year than it did last year.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I think heading into last year, he was Jamal Murray's backup, and there was some times where he was going to probably see some minutes because Jamal Murray was going to miss time, but it just obviously didn't work out. But I don't know if I'd take him with a late round pick, maybe in a deeper league. We'll see. I'm doing a 16-team mock on Wednesday. Wednesday's a 16-team mock, so we'll see. Maybe he ends up being a late round pick for me. But this is your boy right here. We're going to talk about Zion Williamson. A reporter asked him what he worked on, and he said being unguardable. And then I saw another report that, and I'd put this in quotes, but I don't know if that's the exact way that was said. So I probably should have just paraphrased that instead of putting it in quotes, but whatever. Reports that he focused on his body and did it like a professional. I think for the first time in his career, I don't remember who said it either, but it was maybe it was Willie Green, maybe it was a GM, maybe I don't remember, but that he focused on his body this summer, acted like a professional with it. I think they had an external person to work with on his body. I don't remember. I should have pulled up this quote, but working on his body, working on his diet, things like that. Just seems to be taking basketball very serious, doing things the right way. I ask, are we back in on the Zion train? But it seems like you never got off.
Yeah, yes, sir. Let's go, Zion. But all right. So I think, obviously the quotes aside, I think David Griffin also said that, yeah, he's treating his body like a professional. He said he's got better people around him now, which is very important for someone that young and that much of a talent, right? If you don't have the right people around you, it could really take your career to the different way. Being unguardable, he's not wrong, man. Like when he's played, like there's no one who's gotten him at the rim. He is probably one of the best, if not the best finisher. Right? That is not up for debate. Like he's up there, right? If he plays, that's the thing. He's only played 114 games in his career over 4 years. That to me was a shocking number, right? That's 1.5 seasons. Basically, he's a third year player or second year player in terms of games experience entering into this year. So where his ADP is at the moment, right? Which is on Yahoo, we have it at about in the 60s. Is that correct? Yeah, Yahoo, we have it in the 60s. In 64, in Fantrax, we have it at 52. Do you have our the draft only data?
Yes, he is 49.
49. Okay. So at those spots, I would be happy to take a crack at him. I feel I'm the minority in this, I know in this community. I feel there is a top 25, top 30 upside in him. And all he needs to do for that is get his free throw percentage up by 3% even. Right? That will take him to the top 30. And if we are baking in percentage increases for players who are in their year two, year three, we're looking at Cade getting his percentages up. We're waiting on Jalen Green to up his percentages. Why can't we think the same for a guy who's played 114 games and is coming in? Why can't he up his percentage by a few percentage points, right? And with the volume he takes, then that's going to make a big impact. Secondly, we all know his legendary college defensive stats. Now, they haven't translated so far in the 114 games, right? And we have him at what, like last year in the limited time he played, he averages steal point, 1.1 steal and 0.6 blocks. If this is even 1.2, 1.3 and 0.7 in blocks, right? Again, we know how much this makes a difference. I'm not saying he's going to go back to 2 blocks and 1.5 steals a game. No, just a little bit of an increase and a little bit of free throw increase. And that takes him to the top 30. Is it likely? No, it's not. But at pick 50 or pick 64, you're not getting many guys who have top 25 upside. So again, depending on how the rest of your draft is gone, I would be happy to take him there, knowing that I am going to get some shenanigans in terms of missed games. I am going to get an injury risk there. But again, you make up for it for the rest of your draft. And if it hits, you have a league winner. This is how you kind of differentiate winning leagues versus, having a second or third finish. It's these kind of guys you take. For example, last year it was Shea. Shea was going in the 40s and 50s in leagues, and people who took him essentially got a first round player in the pick 40s, right? I'm not saying Zion is Shea from last year, but these are the kind of guys we need to be looking at if we want to win leagues.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has the talent. I'm not saying he probably won't finish as a quote unquote first rounder in 9-cat scoring because he doesn't really hit many threes.
Yeah.
Even if he has improved the free throw percentage slightly, probably still isn't enough and still turns the ball over. But I think he kind of has that Giannis effect of he's significantly better than what his 9-cat ranking and production is showing because he has a couple of categories that he's just either not going to help you in or just really hurt you in, such as not helping you with threes, hurting you with turnovers and free throw percentage. But he is a guy that I think that I know I'm lower on him. You're much higher on him. When I've drafted him in mocks, it's because I got Giannis in the first round. You don't have to punt free throws with either of them. Like if you don't choose to, like you don't have to. But I think going ahead and rolling with that and saying, okay, I'm going to go Giannis. I'm going to not hit threes, not have turnovers or have a lot of turnovers, not have a high free throw percentage. Perfect. Let me go ahead and add Zion to this in round 4 or 5. Like if that's something that you can make happen, I think that's probably the best use of Zion where you're able to maximize what his production is and having those two kind of guys fit together. The games played still worries me, and you can't draft. I mean, you have to consider it, I think, but like what you said, what you do is you take safer options. Like you don't pair, you don't go Paul George end of round 3, Kawhi start of round 4, and then Zion end of round 5. Like you just don't do that because that's like you're begging for them to get hurt. Like if you get one, that's great. But if you're just doing all of this and just saying, well, I'm going to keep my fingers crossed and hope they play games. I mean, sure, you have a slight chance of this hitting and you having the greatest fantasy team of all time, but it's just the odds are very much against that. So I think if you have, in my opinion, Giannis and other healthy players that are probably going to play 70 plus games with your first 4 picks, then I'm probably very comfortable taking Zion round 5, maybe even round 4 if I'm going that with the first 3 picks and able to continue to do that after that. I'm pretty low on Zion, but again, you have to kind of take some of these media day quotes and say what's real, what's not. All the, he's in the best shape of his life ones, like,
We've heard that before.
Right. They say that every year. But for David Griffin to say this is the first time that we've seen Zion train like a pro. And it's like, are we saying this just like why are we saying this? Are we saying this to say, oh guys, like seriously, like those first 4 years, like we were really upset with what he did and he's finally just meeting the standard? Or is it saying, guys, those first 4 years, like he wasn't operating properly because he just wasn't acting like a professional. He's actually doing the thing now, like watch out, like league, watch out. He's ready to take over. I guess you kind of have to look at it like that. Which one is it? That's for each fantasy manager to kind of decide when they're drafting, is to say, how real is this? I'm probably leaning towards more this being kind of real and saying, oh shoot, okay, he's actually going to be the Zion that we kind of expected when he came out. Not going to ever root against the player, so hopefully he's able to have a good season.
Correct.
And Alperen Şengün, I don't know how high you are on him, but I know that I am a little bit low. I was high on him last year. I'm still high on him in Dynasty. I was just a little bit lower on him heading into this season because I just questioned how he was going to fit, because some of the things that he struggled with are things that I felt like Ime Udoka was really going to want out of the center position, such as what's his impact defensively. He averaged 0.9 steals, 0.9 blocks last year, but he wasn't a great defender. Like he's not going to protect the paint and make teams, they're not going to funnel teams into their shot blocker. Like he's not awful, but he's not probably up to the same standard as some of the other guys. So I was questioning, okay, how much is Ime Udoka going to put up with this if he has 4 guys out there that are playing really good defense, forcing turnovers, and then teams are able to just keep scoring because Şengün's down there and he's a liability at times. But he talked today at Media Day about his 2 focuses this summer were defense and shooting. He said he didn't think he was a bad shooter, but you can always improve. And I think having him as kind of a stretch 5 in a way, I think that kind of opens up things offensively for them to the point where just having 5 guys that can shoot from deep. I mean, he averaged 0.3 threes per game last year, so he wasn't really adding them. But if he can get that to a 3 per game, that helps. And the other thing that was mentioned was Jeff Green signed with Houston, and Şengün has been asking all the questions that he can, trying to get every bit of information about how Jokic operates and how Jokic prepares for things. And the fact that he is, one, obviously not super surprising, but seeing the comparisons that everybody makes about this, tall European big man that can pass, and just saying, baby Jokic, cool. That would be great for that to happen in fantasy. I don't think anybody's expecting that because, it's Jokic. But if he can kind of approach and start to kind of mold his game in that way, that opens up a lot for Houston. I feel like the past few months I've been kind of down on Şengün, saying, I don't know if I'm really super interested in drafting him, but I have no problem going back on what I've been saying if this is actually something that's legit here. Like, are we, not expecting him to come in and be some dominant shot blocker, but if he's able to stay on the floor and play more minutes because he's either helping defensively or just simply not limiting them defensively, and he's able to add to close to a 3 per game or 0.8 threes per game and trying to be more like Jokic, like those are things that to me stand out. It's not your typical, oh my gosh, he's done this so much better, he's a whole new player, blah, 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 blah. It's not something like that. Like, this felt more tangible to me. Is that something that you're kind of reading into as a good thing, or something that just kind of whatever?
Yes. So I, like you, I was big on Şengün last year as well. I feel like his fantasy skill set, even if he ends up like a mini Sabonis, that is a win, right? We don't have to look at a top 20 player of all time in Nikola Jokic. We could even look at a Sabonis, and that's a W right there. this year, right, where he's going in drafts, and first of all, these comments are really encouraging, right, in terms of defense and shooting, yes, and then Nikola Jokic, a lot of big men should look at that coming in as a prototype for what they can be if they're not as, if they're not the most athletically gifted, or even if they are, right, like you want to look at that as a prototype for building out your game. In terms of for this year, he's one of those guys who has a wide range of outcomes it could get, right? Like he could get in and you could get a top 30 player if he plays 33, 34 minutes and Udoka falls in love with him. Or if he's playing 28 minutes a night, then you're not getting that value. You're getting top 70, top 80, maybe even top 90 value then, right? That's more like it. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, where he's going at the moment, right? If you see he's going 61 on Yahoo, 52 on Fantrax. Do you have the ADP data for our leagues?
54 on FBI.
54. I don't know if I'm looking to get him in the 50s unless in the next 1 week or so in the preseason we see him, we see some encouraging signs from him. I would rather wait till the 60s and 70s to get him just because in the 50s, even if he gets that 33, 34 minutes from 50, how many spots of upside is there then? Like it's maybe 10 spots, right? Which is good. Don't
Yeah.
get me wrong. 10 spots of upside in each round. If you're able to get that, you're in a chance to win your league. But the downside is 50 spots. The downside, the top 90 player, 40 spots. So I would be looking at him in the 70s if I can get him all day, right? In the 60s, I'll take a look, just given that if I've drafted differently and more sort of safer outcomes in the first 5 picks. That's how I would look at him. He does have really good upside, but there are players on that team, right? I mean, a lot of players talk about Jock Landale. A lot of people talk about Jock Landale being there. I don't see him coming in the way that much of Sengun's growth, but they could play Jabari at 5, right? If they really
Mm-hmm.
want to go small.
Mm-hmm.
They could get. I don't think that's also that likely, but if that really depends on how Eason plays as well. If they want to play Eason, that's the only way of making Eason play 25 minutes. So there are a lot of outcomes there, and Houston's a stacked team, as we know, like stacked with talent. I'm not sure for like overall for championship, but stacked with
Right.
fantasy talent for sure. So that's where I'm at with it in terms of for Sengun. It'd be very interesting. One of the watch list guys for me in the preseason is him and how he's played.
Yeah, I think preseason will be interesting. I don't know if this will happen during the preseason, during the regular season, but if I'm Udoka, I'm definitely experimenting with Jabari Smith at the 5. Probably not as a starting unit, but minutes here and there, seeing if we like it. If it works out well, like Jabari Smith at the 5, Tari Eason at the 4, Dylan Brooks at the 3, Jalen Green at the 2, Fred VanVleet at the 1, or even moving in with, an athletic guy like Cam Whitmore or getting Amen Thompson at the 1, just like with if you have like Thompson, Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, Tari Eason, Jabari Smith, like that's 5 guys that can play defense, or 5 athletic guys. I don't know if I would call Jalen Green like a really good defender, but like he's athletic enough that I feel like he'd fit in with 4 other guys that I think are good defenders for sure. I haven't done enough research to determine whether Jalen Green is a good defender or not, so don't take that either way with like confidently, but there's a lot of lineup experimenting that Houston can do. And if some of this stuff clicks, it's like, are you really force feeding Sengun 32, 34 minutes a night? Not because Jock Landale is going to come in there and take his minutes, but because this small ball lineup is really, really good defensively, and we still have offensive scoring, offensive creation. But is Sengun also having him off the floor limits the offense? I think it's just a lot to kind of figure out with Houston because we haven't seen it. It feels like a brand new team just with the amount of talent they've added. So I think it's something, like you said, preseason watch list, definitely something that'll be interesting to watch over the next few weeks. I don't know exactly when their first preseason game is, but definitely something to keep an eye on. John Morant obviously has the 25-game suspension, but there were reports saying that he would be traveling with the team and practicing the entire time during the suspension. Does that make, because, I feel like a lot of times when there's suspensions, guys aren't allowed on team facility, like in the facility at all. But it seems like Ja is going to, one, get a chance to like build chemistry with guys off the floor, such as like Derrick Rose, Marcus Smart, that are new, and continue to work out, be in game shape. I'm sure even do a little bit more because he doesn't have to, like, he's not playing games, so he's gonna be able to work his body even harder. There might be a couple games when he first comes back that it's, you can tell he's getting back into playing, but I don't think it's going to take him long. Like, I think after the 25 games, he's going to get right back to being John Morant. So it's not going to feel like a lost season. Obviously, missing 25 games is huge, especially in the FBI leagues. Like, that's a big loss if we're drafting again in January. And he's not going to be back until I'm trying to
Mid-December, I reckon.
Mid-December.
Christmas,
Yeah.
around there. Yeah.
I was trying to remember. I thought I did wrote something about it. I think it's like a couple days after Christmas. So I think it is something around there. So if you're not able to use him there, like, obviously it loses value, but in a full season, I feel like I'd be more comfortable after realizing or hearing that he's going to be around the team, as opposed to missing the first 2 months, then trying to get reacclimated to, being around teammates. There's only so much work you can do away from the team. Are you more comfortable, as I'm saying, his FBI ADP is 67. Does that go up for you, or was that already kind of high?
Yeah, so I think it is encouraging that he's going to be with the team. That means his transition, as you said, to starting or coming off the bench for the first few games and then starting after his suspension is high. For me, it really depends on your league. At that ADP or in the 60s, I would not be looking at him, because even when he comes back, his upside in 8 cat, even, right, not even 9 cat, is what, a top 40 player, top 50 player, right? He's nowhere near that upside of like someone who's going to give you top 20 value when they come back, or top 15 value when they come back, right? Most of us don't have him projected that high. So in a category league in the 60s, I even if I've drafted safer guys in the first 5 or 6 picks, I'm pretty sure that in that round I could take someone else who would fit my builds better than the guy who's going to miss 25 games. So at 60, too high for me. However, in a points league, where he has a chance of doing really well, for all our points league listeners, maybe, yeah, in the 60s I would have a crack, because when he comes back, he can be a top 25 player easily, right? I would be more comfortable in a roto setting to grab him in the 70s, 80s. In a head-to-head, I just don't feel, I'm not as high on him this year. I just don't feel that the juice is worth the squeeze at like 64. It's a bit too high for me, man. There's guys there who I'd rather have. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. With FBI, you're absolutely right. I wouldn't touch him until maybe even like past 100. I'll have a look if I want a wild card for my playoffs. But then I need to make the playoffs to have a wild card for my playoffs in January. So yeah, that's where I'm at with it. It is encouraging he's there. That means his transition is faster, but overall, I would have him much lower on my draft.
Yeah, I had wrote this to talk about because I was like, oh, maybe I will be, and then I checked his ADP as you were talking. I was like, that's already a tad high to get him at round, like that would be in the 6th round. So if you're looking at it, guys that are right after him are Chris Middleton, Tyler Hero, Jeremy Grant, CJ McCollum, Derek White's going to go down, Devin Vassell, Cameron Johnson. So it's like, man, Ja is really, really good in points leagues. Very obviously one of the best point guards in the NBA, but he's not giving you a ton of threes. He's turning it over a lot. His free throw percentage is, it's pretty low for a point guard. Despite being a freak athlete, he doesn't really block shots. His field goal percentage regressed after being really, really high the year before. I remember having this conversation where it was like, man, Ja just had probably the best season, that he's like a really, really good season, and he was still barely a top 50 guy in 9 cat value. And it's
Correct.
because of these little limitations here and there. It's like, how much better could he get? He averaged 27.4 points, 5.7 boards, 6.7 assists 2 years ago. And it's like, okay, like the assists and rebounds went up, points went down a little bit, but the field goal percentage regressed. So it's like, overall, I think this season he's still a guy. Like if he didn't have the 25 game suspension, obviously he'd go higher, but I don't think he's a guy that's like, oh, like without the suspension. I think you were kind of getting at this, but like you're taking him, I don't even know. It's hard to say, but like, are you taking him in like the 2nd or 3rd round? Probably 3rd, 4th round with no
Mm.
suspension.
Assists are really hard, right? So I think he'd go third,
Yes.
fourth round, maybe.
Yeah, and he obviously like getting a guy that can average 25 plus points, 5, 6 rebounds, and 8 like obviously that has value in its own, even if the 9 cap value doesn't translate perfectly. But yeah, I mean, with the 25 game suspension, it kind of hurts. I think I'd take him in the top. I'll say, man, it's hard for me. I don't even know if I would do it. I'd probably have to go like 8th round, just because I mean, missing 25 games is I feel comfortable about when he comes back. That's a lot to miss that many games early on for me. I think I'm probably pretty hesitant to take him. With this news, I'm more comfortable. I think when he comes back, he's going to be just fine. But I don't know, 7th or 8th round, probably more towards the 8th round for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and just a couple other things that we'll briefly hit on because we're at an hour now. But Dallas is planning to start alongside Kyrie, Luca, and Grant Williams, Derek Lively, and Omax. I think it's Olivier Maxence Prosper. I need to look up these pronunciations for some of these rookies, but I think I said that one right. But they're planning to start, though. They're going to be their starting 5 during the preseason. Now, obviously, that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the starting 5 during the regular season. They could just be trying to see how these guys fit alongside their stars before kind of seeing where they're going to fit in this season. But I think it's encouraging because there was reports earlier in the summer that Derek Lively did not look good for Dallas. I remember Josh Lloyd had tweeted about saying what other rookies aside from the top 3 are probably going to start this season. And I said, "Oh, Derek Lively," and he's like, "No, like what I've heard is that he doesn't look good." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Obviously, I don't have any sources, but to see them want to start him, I don't know if it's just kind of like a thing where they're just trying to see what they got. But I have to think that maybe not as much in redraft, maybe a little bit more optimism for Dynasty and like a tad as like a late round flyer for Lively. Does that make you want to draft Derek Lively or Omax in the final round of the draft?
Final round by no means what am I against it. You have a crack right there. The far worst
Mm-hmm.
upside picks you could get. He does have that quintessential big man skill set in terms of fantasy, field goal, blocks, rebounds, right? Excuse me. I think in terms of it'll be very interesting to see in the preseason. Does he stand out in these games? And does
Mm-hmm.
does it look like it's in he's going to play 23, 24 minutes? Because that's the key, right? He could be starting and still not be playing 20 minutes because if you look at that depth chart, they have centers there. They have Dwight Powell, they have Rashawn Holmes, um, who's there, and then they also have Maxi Kleber as well, right? Who can play at 5.
Mm-hmm.
So there are different types of centers available for Jason Kidd to work into lineups. So I would be keen to see in the preseason, but I would also there is a chance that he really does well in the preseason and then he gets like hyped to go in the top 100 or top 110. I mean, I don't know if I'll be interested in that, obviously depending on how the preseason goes. But in the last round, by no means like am I against it. You definitely go for it.
Yeah, I agree. Especially more so for Lively, just if he is starting, I think getting some blocks there in that last round has value. Even if he does well in the preseason, that's a good point that you make to try and like hold the line, kind of realize, that it may not translate to a full season of fantasy success. And it's something to kind of temper your expectations, let everybody else, let the ADP run up and go ahead and get some better value later on. But last round, I don't think you can go wrong with any pick in the last round, anybody that has a little bit of upside. So Draymond Green injured his, I think, left ankle. 50-50 shot him right. And is expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks, but he'll be reevaluated in 2. I don't know how much the reevaluation will impact the timeline, but best case scenario is that there's a chance that he's there for opening night or only misses a game or 2. Worst case is he ends up missing the first couple weeks of the season. His FBI ADP was 82. Does realizing that he's going to miss potentially miss the first couple weeks. How does that impact how you feel about drafting him this year? And then also when you look at it, I think this is what's probably going to end up happening, in my opinion. is when he misses however many games he ends up missing, that's probably going to give them the chance to start Chris Paul, Steph, Clay, Andrew Wiggins, Kevon Looney. I don't like Jonathan Kuminga will benefit with some extra minutes here and there, but I think this is actually going to be them starting both Chris Paul and Kevon Looney, which we spent the whole summer trying to figure out which one they were going to start. And now opening night, it looks like it's going to be both. But how does that impact where you're taking Draymond, considering he's going kind of end of round 7, beginning of round 8?
Yeah. Three things for me on this, right? Number one, I think just given that Draymond is not a quote unquote sexy name that people find in drafts, right? Like it's that
Yeah.
punt points players are, you could get them late. That's why punt points is a really strong build. I don't know if you saw the draft yesterday that we did with Beat Up and I did. Like Emma, the team she drafted was a punt points team, and she got a lot of value because people are always looking at points and flashy assists, right? In the beginning, tend to
Yeah.
at least. So number one, I think Draymond could fall even from the 90s. Like if he's not, you could get him outside the top 100. Like right now, he's going in the 80s and 90s. Outside the top 100, I'm happy to have a look
Yeah.
there, and I would let him fall outside the top 100 because I feel there is a chance of that. Right, there's a strong chance of that. That's number one. Number two, I think in terms of fantasy, if you want rebounds at the end of the draft for like a few weeks, if the Warriors schedule is good, potentially, that's another strategy in late rounds. Like if you want to make a strong start to your season, look at the guys who for the first few weeks may have upside there, right? In terms of first few weeks may start. So if you want to boost in rebounds for the first 2 weeks, you're behind it a little bit. There's no one available at pick 150. Pick Looney. He'll give you 10 rebounds, 9 rebounds easily, right? That's the second one. For Jonathan, well, I'm big on him in Dynasty. I do have him in a couple of leagues, but again, I'm with you. I don't see he's going to do more than 20, 25, 22 minutes, 23 minutes like that. And again, if you want to have a crack in the final round, I'm not going to fault any of these picks, right? Because it's the final round. You could drop them after one game. But I don't see him providing that much of value, and even with Draymond out. That's how I would look at this. Yeah, and I'd be excited to get Draymond after pick 100, man. Like he could potentially return 1 week into the season.
Yeah, it may not be that long, but he's the guy that goes under the radar for me. He's definitely a guy that I'm like, I don't really know if I want Draymond. So something I need to learn to be more aware of. But this last point we have is Brandon Miller. Maybe this was just me totally missing this report from July that he had been dealing with mononucleosis or mono, which impacted, I think, either him during workouts or impacted him during summer league. But Steve Clifford said today that he's fully healthy, and I will pull this tweet up in a second, but he gained 10 pounds of muscle back. So he's up to 210. But after kind of a poor summer league showing, knowing that he may have been limited by an illness and that he's back to 100% and has gained 10 pounds, I know, which, I'll just go ahead and pull up. Let me see if yeah, so I have it right here. The Muscle Watch leaderboard today tweet from Michael Gallagher says it on there that Brandon Miller gained 10 pounds. Peyton Watson gained 20. Max Christie gained 15 to 20 pounds. Walker Kessler, 15 pounds. Victor Wembanyama, 10 to 15 pounds. Jason Tatum, 12 pounds. Giannis, 11. Scotty Barnes, 9. JT Thor, 8. Evan Mobley, 7. Nikola Jovic, not Jokic, Jovic, gained 20 pounds. So, all that to ask, as I go back to Brandon Miller, do we feel more comfortable with him? Are we going to kind of chalk that kind of iffy summer league performance? I mean, he had some flashes, but it felt like he wasn't getting to the basketball. Maybe it was because of the illness. Not saying, I guess just what's kind of your outlook for him this season?
Yeah, for me, while it's encouraging about the weight gain and all the muscle that everyone's gained, for me, he remains a second last round kind of guy. Like if you want him, like maybe potentially you don't get him in the last round just because it's he's a number 2 pick and people are going to take him earlier. So if you want to have a crack at him after like pick 125, 130 like that, I got no problem with it because at that stage of the draft, this is what you're kind of looking for. Like if it blows up and he does well, he gives you 30, 40 spots of value, you're laughing. So I'm happy with him in the later rounds. In terms of we still need to keep in mind that the depth in Charlotte for that spot is that there are guys who can play, right? There's obviously Miles Bridges when he comes back. There's PJ. There's Gordon Hayward as well who's playing there. Depending on Cody Martin if he plays up at the three as well, but most likely he's going to play a lot of the two. Um, so it'd be interesting to see how they run things right in the preseason as well. But again, one thing to keep in mind, the preseason is not going to have Miles Bridges, right? So maybe Brandon Miller plays 32, 33 minutes, looks good, and then his ADP goes up again. And then we draft him at pick 100 or pick 105, 90, like that. And then when the season starts, first 10 games, he's doing well, we're laughing. And then after 10 games, Miles Bridges comes back, and then his minutes could potentially reduce as well. This is all conjecture, obviously, but
Yeah.
this is just how I'm saying in terms of like viewing preseason. View it, but also look at it with the broader circumstances there as well. So yeah, that's how where I'm at with Brandon Miller in terms of the last few rounds. Be happy to have a crack and see what happens from there. Another thing to note from the Charlotte presser is Mark Williams wants to shoot threes.
I missed that.
He
That's a
says
good one.
he said he's gonna yeah, he said he's gonna try to shoot a few threes. I mean, but that's we talked about this earlier in the pod, right? You have a lot of these big men who come up with these kind of quotes in the preseason. So let's see if he does. I'm big on Mark Williams this year. Like I think we've talked about it as well. I think not just from a three standpoint, but from a block standpoint, he could really be like a 1.7, 1.8 blocks guy because his college block rate was so high, and he's on the muscle watch list as well.
He is.
So I'm pretty excited about Mark Williams this year. But if he shoots threes, then wow. But it's unlikely chance.
Yeah. Shoot, I totally missed that Mark Williams thing. I like that. Hopefully he doesn't shoot him. Let him shoot him in the preseason, and then we don't want to tank his field goal percentage, so we don't want him to be in the habit of it. But his Brandon Miller's ADP in FBI leagues was 144, 140.73 with how the numbers work out. He went undrafted in two of them. I think he's a guy, like you said, late round pick. I was pretty low on Brandon Miller, and I think I've said this on a podcast before, but a lot of my frustration and why I'm so low on Brandon Miller is the fact that Charlotte took him at 2, and he definitely should. Scoot Henderson should have been at 3, but before that, I was very much Brandon Miller go at 3. Like he was still the third best player in this draft to me. Maybe not for fantasy, but just third best talent to me. But then the fact that Charlotte took him at 2, it just felt like a reach with Scoot there. So I feel like I have this negative viewpoint of Brandon Miller. But he's still a very good player. I think, like you said, during the preseason, not having Miles Bridges, he's going to play a larger role. Just, I think he's probably a guy that's going to end up being maybe really good in the preseason and then kind of limited as the season goes on, because I think especially early on, Charlotte's going to try and be better than they were last year. Like they were missing a lot of guys. They have more talent this year. They should be better. I think Charlotte is a dark horse play-in team, which feels weird to say considering how bad they were. But they have Miles Bridges back. LaMelo Ball is healthy. Mark Williams is another year under his belt. I think that there's a chance that they're playing in the postseason. They were playing team the 2 years before that. So all that to be said, Brandon Miller totally fine as a late round target. And I think hearing that, maybe it was just something that I needed to hear, that he had been sick and now he's not. So maybe he'll be a little bit better this season than Summer League kind of showed, hopefully. But that's going to do it for Media Day. I'm sure there was a lot more quotes that were a lot of fun to talk about that we could have pulled up, but, a lot of them didn't mean a thing. But they're fun.
Yeah, like the quintessential Anthony Davis is the face of the franchise. Anthony Davis is the number one option. That quote comes out every year for the last 4 years from LeBron and from the coach. While I do hope that Anthony Davis does become the first option, because LeBron's touching 40, and we hope that Anthony Davis can become the first option. But that's one of those which you hear every year, and you've heard it this year as well.
Yeah, and obviously there's things like that, but also you talk about like the drama-ish quotes, like John Collins saying that he was surprised by everybody in Utah with the lack of egos there, and it's like, okay, man, like yeah, I think everybody knows that Trae Young has an ego, but it's why he's the point guard that he is the fact that he has an ego. Anyways, I don't think it took a John Collins saying that for me to know that Trae Young had an ego. But I think that'll do it, because obviously we can pick apart a million more quotes. But Karan, thank you for joining me to talk about Media Day.
Appreciate it, man. Hope this was useful for everyone, and can't wait for the preseason, man. So much is going to come out. So many hot takes are going to come in. This is the time that we all live for. Draft season starting. There's going to be so much happening. This is exciting times,
Yeah, man. And good luck with the rest of your World Cup draft.
Yes, sir. Hopefully no one snipes people.
Fingers crossed, but that's going to do it. All right. See you, man. All right. So that's going to do it. This was episode 28 of the Take Me Later podcast. Make sure you give Karan a follow at Karan_Talwar27. If you're watching it, it was right up there on the screen. You could have seen it for the past hours. Hopefully you got it down to give him a follow. Make sure you are following. Let me go ahead and make sure I'm doing this right. At FBI Basketball. At FBI Basketball on Twitter. Follow me at NoahRubin22. You can subscribe to my Substack, noahrubin.substack.com. Like, rate, review this podcast if you're on YouTube. Just share it. Whatever you got to do. Tell the world to listen to this podcast. It would help us out a ton. But that's going to do it for this episode. And thanks for listening.
You just listened to another episode from the Fantasy Basketball International Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us. And for more information about joining our community, please check out our website at fbibasketball.com.